How are you? I get it. I get it. Well, we're gonna see. The camera was plugged in, and when it's left plugged in, it overheats. So there's a pretty good chance that it's not gonna work. So this big sign here that says "Remember to unplug live stream once broadcast is ended" apparently is not working. But the whole system actually was left on anyway. Uh, Probably the city council meeting last week, I would think. Well, I helped. Oh, look at that. We're good. All right. All right. Hold on. Well, it's preparing. All right. Looks like we are. Hold on. Let me. Yes, we're good to go. Yeah.
We are recording?
We are live, so you'll have to use your microphones.
All right.
And, yeah, I will turn that off so we don't get
We're good
feedback.
to go?
All right.
All right, well, welcome everybody to the February Library Board meeting. I will call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone survived the cold weather, and now it feels like summer. I just saw kids walking around in shorts and t-shirts coming from the elementary school. I'm like, it's only 50 degrees, people. Anyway, I have my
But
coat
80
and my
degrees
heated shirt on
warmer
still.
than last week.
But yeah,
So,
30 below, that's a big change, so it does feel like summer to them. If everyone got an opportunity to look at the minutes from the January 29th meeting, I will entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and second. Any questions, additions, changes to the minutes? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, financial reports. Chris,
all
I'll turn
right.
it over to you.
Yeah, we, I guess everything I think is fairly self-explanatory. It turns out, and I forget if I have this, I think I have this down under old business. For some reason, Janine Short and I both thought that the Duntrust CD was up in February, and it's actually March. Why we were a month off, I don't know. I think it may have renewed at one point, or I neither of us could quite remember. But anyway, it comes up on the 5th of March instead of the 5th of February. So we'll just go ahead and reinvest at that point. She didn't anticipate any changes to interest rates, and it doesn't look like anything's made much movement. So there's that. But anyway, other than that, I think everything is pretty straightforward. If you guys have any questions.
Chris, I thought that we were going to check on some other interest rates and availabilities.
We did,
Yeah, okay.
and it's negligible in difference. Yeah. So everybody's being very conservative right now, and the best interest rates are short-term, 9 to 12 months. Anything out from that, it just drops by a percentage point or so. So, yeah.
Yeah, Chris and I met, and he kind of went over, he did some research, and so we met
Yeah.
and just decided, and then realizing it was not till March, but
Yeah.
I think.
So we were just ahead of the game by a month, so good for us.
Yeah.
So
My
that'll be ready to go.
My only question was just, I think we need to use as many local
Right,
institutions as
right.
possible. And my
Yeah.
thought being that we had gotten money from what was the credit union?
From Black Hills.
Black Hills.
Yeah. Well, and we've
My
also
bad.
gotten money from First Interstate.
I understand it.
And in fact, we're applying for more grant money. I talked to Janine about that, unrelated to the Dunn Trust, but about that the other day, because I was making a deposit, and she asked me about, she said, "Oh, come here." And she was asking about the summer reading program fundraiser that's happening over at the community center, because Dakota Daughters had asked for funding. And she wondered if it would be better to give them the money. And I said, well, we've applied for a community improvement grant, or I forget what the official name of it is. And she says, oh, okay, well, we'll deal with it that way. So, yeah, there is some support there as well. But I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Yes, ma'am.
It might be in our interest to find out who will be taking Janine's place because she's retiring.
Oh, is she? She didn't say anything.
First
Okay,
of April.
okay.
So, to bring someone else in and just kind of maybe have them in that meeting, if you have one,
Yeah,
might be,
okay, yeah, I'll talk to her about that. Yeah. Who our point person over there will be anyway. Doesn't necessarily have, that person doesn't have to be a member of the Dunn Trust Fund committee anyway. There's nothing that says that you have to have a banker. It might be beneficial to have one of the, have Ann as the finance officer. So we'll just have to figure out, yeah. Right,
contact person.
yeah,
And she knows a lot of the history.
right,
It was
right,
Dan Mayer and then Janine, so
yeah,
they've known it for a lot of years.
yeah. Yeah, I'll visit with her and see what's going on with that. Thank you.
I don't think she'll unretire because of the Dunn Trust, but you never.
I doubt it, yeah. But, because she has grandkids, so you know what that's like, right? I think she does anyway, but, okay. So, yeah, any other questions or comments? Short stories? Editorials?
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the financial report from January. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Yes?
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Kelly, you seconded that? Or, oh, Terry did, okay, sorry.
All right, director's report.
All right. We are at about 75% of our goal for the summer reading program, which is great for, 3 months out. There's a push in the new newsletter about helping to donate. We're also, we'll talk about it during the Green Thumb Gala. So I'm hoping that that will help. We've applied, like I mentioned before, we've applied for a First Interstate Bank grant to help with that. So I'm hoping that by the time it rolls around this summer, that we'll actually have this year and next year funded. So pretty confident about that. And even if we're a little bit short, we still have a year to get the rest of it for next year. So so that, I think we're in pretty good shape that way. The February artist pulled out, so I put up some posters I had gotten from the Smithsonian a while ago that I was just waiting for an opportunity to put up about bias, and so those are up. We also had the painted violin project up for a couple of weeks from the Rushmore. That was pretty cool. And then in March, we've got Sturgis Brown High School is the artist for the month. Our programming and our reporting numbers are all pretty good. As far as facility updates, during all the cold weather, we did not have the water lines freeze for the first time in a decade, maybe or more. I'm not sure. As I mentioned before, one of the things that Judd is concerned about is that constant freeze thaw every year. It's just got to be wearing out the pipes, the copper in the pipes. But his fix to put a heater under the sink and cut a hole so that the heat can go up inside that cinder block area seems to have done a pretty good job. Nothing, like I said, nothing froze. So that's good. That's good. As far as other things, everything is working pretty good right now. So yeah, I think we're in pretty good shape right now. As soon as spring is over. We need to get the carpets done because it's been a while, and there's some, they need it. And so we'll see what we get for quotes on that, and get that taken care of. But otherwise, there aren't any big or even little projects right now that need to be done, aside from some touch-up paint, but that can be a rally week project. Otherwise, just because of various issues, we haven't been able to have the Friends get together and ratify the bylaws. But hopefully after the meeting, if we can find a time to do that, it'd be a short meeting. We just need to look over that stuff and make sure it's all good. And then I can start the 501c3 process. The Rapid City Public Library tried to do a grant last year to study reciprocity between all the libraries in the consortium. The grant was not, the proposal was not approved. This year it's been approved, and so they've been invited to submit a proposal. And that's coming up pretty soon. So we'll see if that gets accepted, then they would study what it would take for reciprocity within the consortium. And then once they determine what that would look like, then I assume that every library board would then have to look at it and decide whether that was something that we wanted to get into.
So what are you, like the arrangement we had with Rapid City? Is that what you're?
The idea would be that the consortium, all the libraries in the consortium would have reciprocity. So you could take,
Go to Custer and get a.
you could go to Custer, you could go to Hermosa, you could go to Edgemont, you could go to Spearfish,
But not Rapid.
Rapid, all of the libraries in the consortium would be included in this reciprocity agreement. And Rapid is,
But what changed there? What? Because they'll have funding.
that's a good question. That's a good question. Well, this was an idea that came up at the very beginning of the consortium. Was kind of a long-term goal was to be able to let every patron in the consortium freely visit every library in the consortium. Some of the problems, well, we've seen the problems that we have or that we had with Rapid. Other issues are because you're dealing with, 3 different counties, and, funding methods are different within each library in each county. So, you would have to get approval, I guess, from, I don't know if the counties would have to approve it, as much as all the library boards would have to approve this idea that it would be okay to check out books across the libraries. Like I said, last year they applied to apply and were denied. This year they were accepted to apply. So they still have to put together the proposal, then the proposal would have to be approved. If the proposal was approved, then they would do the study to determine what it would take to have reciprocity amongst all the libraries. 4-year, probably, if anything happens, it would be, I imagine it would be probably a year process to do the study. And then, so I think, this is a long-term thing. Whether or not it happens, we'll just have to see. Yeah. But, so anyway, that's I mean, for the patrons, it would be great. It just is whether or not it is doable or not. I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on what's happening with the bill to cut the state library. I did not make it to Pier. A lot of people did, and apparently the chair of the Appropriations Committee, when he walked in the room, looked around and went, "Oh boy." So there were lots of librarians that spoke in favor of keeping it. And as of now, there are some changes that have been made. The bill is still out there, but right now they're looking at a $200,000 cut to the budget, eliminating 3.5 positions rather than the 12 or 13 they were going to eliminate. They're getting rid of the print collection that the library has, which right now the state library, my understanding and what I've checked out from there before, is basically books about library science and library management. Is a lot of what they have. That collection would go away. They would no longer be a federal government repository, so they would not get government documents anymore. And all the state documents, they would no longer provide assistance to the legislature for any decision-making, and any state documents would go to the Historical Society rather than the state library. They would get rid of 4 of the databases that they currently have. Swank is one, which is a video service for public schools. So if you're teaching in faith and you want to show a movie on, I don't know, economics, if it was available on Swank, you could get it and show it to your kids for free. That's going away because a lot of legislatures apparently believe that teachers are just using that to show Disney movies to their kids and don't see why the state should fund that. So that would go away. Ancestry.com is the other database that they would get rid of. And then there were 2 others, but the SDLA president couldn't remember what those were. So those are that's what's going on right now. They would still get rid of the state library board. In flux right now, but that's the way it's looking right now. So again, it's just all kind of in flux. So that's that. It did go out of the committee with a do not pass recommendation, which was good. But so they're still trying to figure out ways to keep it afloat. I don't know what happens if they vote the bill down to get rid of the state library. I don't know what that means as far as any kind of budget appropriation. I think they're all trying to tie it together, but I'm not sure. And that is kind of just in the air right now. During new business, I'll talk about the other bill that's going through that's more concerning to us right now. But I'm also in the middle of the state library survey. That's due the end of March, and so I actually started on that this week, and that's not difficult to do. It takes a little bit of time, but it's not that big of a deal. So that should be done in plenty of time. The salary and classification survey that we talked about, we've turned in all our paperwork. The library had their phone interviews with the company today. I asked them what they're using as far as when they give us numbers, like what are they comparing us to? And I said, is it nationally places our size or whatever? And they said, no, they're just planning on doing regional comparisons. Because I asked, do you guys do like a cost of living adjustment? And they said, no, we don't do any of that. We just show you this is the comparable position in Spearfish and wherever they decide. They were going to talk to Aaron today about specifics that way, I guess. But I was just curious, and that's what they said. The city commissioned this, and so it's well, Jim talked about it at the last meeting.
Has to do with the difficulty with the police, because they haven't accepted the contract.
Yeah, so union negotiations are a big part of it.
So that was one of the things we just said, well, we'll pay for that so that you'll have information, because it seems that that's way off base. There doesn't seem to be any chance at all that somebody a mediator would approve. And there's just a few people on the police force. It's not a consensus. It's just some leadership that won't accept it, as I understand, and but that's good information to have nonetheless.
Yeah, so we'll have comparisons as far as what all the Sturgis City employees' job description and salaries are compared to other places in the region. And then what is done with that is whatever the council decides to do with that. And that's supposed to be done, I know they're doing phone calls today and tomorrow, phone interviews with staff today and tomorrow, and then the end of March, I think, isn't that when I think the end of March is when they'll have the report done. So we're just along for the ride with that, no big deal. There is training for this week we've been doing training on the finance and HR program that the city uses, Cassell. Some of it is applicable to me, and I don't know about Lance, you're kind of your own department, so. Have you ever had to, well, yeah, and we figured out some things that are good. So I think we'll be using the program in a more efficient way. Some of the features that the city hadn't been using in the past, they're going to be using now. And it was good to be able to talk to the people from Cassell directly and say, yeah, this is a problem that we've been having. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, that's because of this. Bloop, bloop, we fixed it. Great, good. So it's yeah, I think it's been good. Especially, I think the finance department, it's going to be great for them. But like I said, for the library, it's not too big of an issue because we'll still be using it in the way we've used it in the past because we do timekeeping through it and bill pay and that stuff. And so, and I'll have to look into that grant aspect of it that you were talking about because I don't have access to that.
As Chris is alluding to, one of the features for generating reports on the Cassell system allows you to assign labor codes, which would allow you to print a report based on whatever criteria you decide to use. So one of the examples, which I understand cities across the country use quite a bit, is a grant writing or, fulfillment labor code tracking. So if, say, we have a grant that we need to, provide a final report to, which includes labor and other assets the city has, we could very easily just print that out as necessary. So there are things, as Chris mentioned, and we have one more day of training, but there are many things that apply to the library and in the city in general that we have not used in the past.
So that's good. Yeah, thanks, Lance. I was having my phone interview when they talked about that, so I missed that part of it. So that's, I think, about where we're at right now as far as the state of the library. Do you guys have any questions about anything? Okay.
We can move on to unfinished business.
All right. And hold on. The unfinished, well, let me get the agenda up. I got one somewhere. There it is. Oh, one other thing. If any of you have a place to put up a poster for the next Music Speaks, I have a couple posters here. I didn't give everybody one, but because I don't know if they get put up places, but if you have a place to put up a poster, that'd be great. We're talking about Beethoven's Fifth Symphony next month. And whether Beethoven was trying to tell us something through that or not, and what people usually think it's about. You probably learned it in school. Fate knocking on the door is the opening of the Fifth Symphony, and it may be, it may not be. You just have to look at it. I mean, it's a brilliant piece of music, and there's so much depth to it that an hour is not nearly enough time to talk about it. But we'll do some listening. Anyway, okay, so back to unfinished business. I guess officially, since we mentioned it with finances, the Dunn Trust is up on the 5th of March with a last interest payment of $1,168.89. The interest that we will have accrued is $15,823.41, which is not bad. And so that will go into the Dunn Trust savings account, and then the trust itself will get renewed to another probably 9 or 12 month. I think it's a 9-month certificate is the best rate we can get right now. And so that's where that will go. So
15,000 was the 9 months?
the what?
That, the total for.
The $15,823 is what interest we've accrued on it up through March.
Okay,
So that 15,000, we've actually, most of that we've gotten already and is in the savings. There will be an extra 1,100, almost, 1,168.89 that will go in when it comes due. So that's what's left on the interest.
What's that designated for?
In the trust, it is designated for anything that the library wants to use it for. There is no actual, it's just anything library related is how the trust was set up.
So could you draw on that, for instance, as we talked about the flooring and the,
Could, yes. Yeah. It could be used to make up the lack in part-time salaries. It could be used to do anything library related.
have we done that yet? Has there been?
I don't believe that money has been used for anything since it was created. To the best, not since I've been here. You guys that have been on the board longer would have it. For a long time, I believe, when I was looking at this, a lot of the, at least in the early stages, the interest that was generated was going back into the trust. But once that interest goes back into the trust, then you can't access it. So it was decided that interest should go in a savings account, so that way the money that's being generated is then there available. And of course, the money that's in the savings account is generating a little bit of interest as well. So that money is being set aside for, I think the board in general, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the board wants that money for a substantial project. So when we go to build a new library, for instance. Yeah, so if we needed to do a remodel of the second floor, that would be what that money would go towards.
Representing the city, I would say, why then did we make that the loss of a few hours for part-time people such an issue when we made the budget? Why didn't we just take that money out of there?
I would
I
say,
mean, I would say if I was the mayor of the city and you didn't tell me that, I would
Because,
probably be upset.
well, that was brought up at one point, that we have other funding, but the issue is that this is money, I mean, is there any other department that salary is paid out of a trust fund? And so
Okay,
the potential loss of.
now I
budget.
understand more why a city representative is on this board. So, I mean, that just needs to be brought up differently, that's all.
Well, and if the board chooses to use that money for something like that, that's the board's decision. Yeah.
Could we go back and look at historically what that money's been spent on? And if we can find,
I can do my best to look through like I said, when I was researching this when I first started, it didn't look like the money had really ever been spent for anything. The children's remodel was different because that money was all donated for that from the Elliots, and I don't believe any of the Dunn Trust money was used for that because there was money left over.
we did put, Lance, maybe you remember this, that we had a meeting and it was, the interest had gotten high on it, so we put that towards the corpus of the trust.
Yeah, at one point,
Because it
yeah.
was the intent to not use it as, a slush fund and to take over the city's responsibility. It was it was given, and I need to look that up, Jim, I'm sorry.
Well,
I can show
we're
you
all part of
the,
the same team, and if the city was short of money and we had it here, but I'm still saying, please give us more money, when you have money that's making interest and being added to and you have never used it, I'd say I'd be interested in how that came about, and I'd say the public has to be aware of that. I'm not saying that there's another position for the library, but I was on that committee and we worked pretty hard to try to get the budget. We worked, in fact, we had almost a 13-hour, one meeting to finalize that budget was 13 hours. And hearing what make sure that we had sufficient money, or at least more than what we had offered originally. And so I'm disappointed that there's money that is here, and you just brought that to the city council while we were already in the middle of lots of we had lots of acid burn over that issue of budget and trying to make that budget work. We'll cut $1.25 million and people. And anyway, okay, I don't mean a lecture. I'm just saying that I think that kind of thing, I took it as if we were going to lose people. We didn't have any other way, and wringing our hands, and we got money in the bank that we could use for that.
well, and I would say the concern, my biggest concern was that money just disappeared out of the budget and nobody would tell me why. It was like, that money's gone, it's too bad, so sad. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. This money was here before, now it's gone. Where did it go? Can we have it back? Well, I can have it back. I don't think you can have it back. We might be, and then eventually it was, well, you
were
can have
short-
a little bit of it back.
We should move on. That's probably
Well,
you're
but,
making me
and
angry.
so that's, yeah, I mean, that's where we're coming from, as far as I think, at least from my end, is I feel like the city has certain responsibilities.
The citizens of the city of Sturgis have a responsibility as best we can. The city council is trying to use the money.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying, yeah.
Okay,
I
I'm just saying
understand.
that should have been part. Instead of saying, here, we've got $15,000, we've never used it, but we want you guys to come up with more money while we're already cutting projects and cutting.
Right. But again, the money is, trying to save up money as a way to make capital improvements.
I certainly understand that, and the city also has that responsibility for capital improvements to the library.
True,
Okay,
true. Yeah.
I just don't think that it's the library board decides how we're going to spend $15,000, but we're going to come back to the city and continue to ask for more money when the city's short of money, and it's well known. I mean, we had tremendous acid, as I said, over how much we had. We didn't have, still don't know how much money there is. I mean, we've tried, but okay, that's, I'm just learning that. That's the way I just heard it this way this time. And I see now why part of the reason I'm here is to represent the city. I thought I was representing the library board to the city.
Well, I think
And
it goes
have,
both ways.
And I have, yes, you're right. Okay.
All right. Any other questions about the Dunn Trust CD? All right. Okay, so I think that's it for unfinished business then.
All right, let's move on to new business.
Okay, the Community Foundation dividend finally, I shouldn't say finally, because it always comes the end of January, into February. And that money typically is reinvested in the endowment. And so this year, the distribution amount is $6,400. Last year, we did take a little bit out to set aside for building issues that may come up in the future, so that we have at least a little bit of seed money to cover to be done. And then the rest of it did go back into the endowment, which, like I said, is typically what has happened with this amount. So my question for you is what do you want to do with the money this year?
So Chris, that's the 6,400?
The 6,400 is what was generated last year through the community foundation. And this is the Elliott money, the Elliott Trust. Well, yeah, I guess it's essentially a trust. Yeah. So this is money that was used for the children's, for the remodel of the children's. But, well, this is actually money that was on top of that, right? Or that was left after, yeah, that was left after the cost for the children's area.
We pulled those funds out to repair some of those little, didn't you have
Tiles.
those hassock chair things that needed repair?
Well, the idea was, the kind of the impetus for doing that was we had a lot of our chairs at the computer stations were falling apart, and they're, replacing those would have wiped out the building budget. It actually did take a good chunk of that. And with the issues that we were having throughout the library and not having a way to pay for them, we decided that taking a little bit of that money and setting it aside so if there was an emergency and we needed to do something, that it would be there. I haven't had to dip into that yet. So that money is just sitting there in case we need it. Once it gets rolled back into the endowment, then then we can't spend it anymore. So, yeah. So that's why we took a little bit out last year. And last year I think I don't remember offhand, it was I think around 4,000 or 5,000 that was generated throughout that year.
Chris, do you have any recommendations on whether we take that distribution or what we might do with it?
I would recommend that we keep adding most of it back to the fund, just because that makes the endowment bigger, which gives us a bigger return the following year. I feel like pulling a little bit out every year would not be a bad idea. Like I said, we took 2,000 last year to set aside for emergencies, just so we would have it. We're definitely in an emergency this year, as Jim reminded us. So some of the shortfall with part-time, we're going to be able to cover through summer reading program funds. The stuff that Cindy is doing related to summer reading program. We've done a kind of a rough calculation of how much that would cost. And then there's still a little bit of money, probably 2,000 to 3,000, that we would be short, that is not related to summer reading program, so we can't use that money for it. We've got at least one grant out, but I haven't heard anything about that. I don't think I hear anything about that until March. But it would definitely help with the part-time situation for this year. I don't want to get in the habit of spending all this money every year, because then our endowment won't grow. And my understanding is that this endowment is definitely for capital improvement. So it would take a while to build up the endowment enough so that we would get a substantial amount out that we could use, because we can take up to 5% of what is each year, depending on the market and how it goes. So I guess my recommendation would be to take some of the money to help the part-time situation, and then put the rest back into the endowment to grow. Well, that's depending on how I do the calculations, it's a little bit different. So I have to, and I haven't done it seriously just because we haven't been in that position yet. But I would assume we're about 6,000 short from what we spent last year on part-time. Like I said, some of that, about 1,500 or so, I think, would be related to summer reading programs. So that part's covered. So that still leaves us about 4,500 short. But that's above and beyond what was budgeted last year. So there would be 2,500 short, I think, from what was budgeted last year that was included in this year's budget.
Discussion. Then there's no parameters on what we can or can't use with that money. We can withhold that money and don't.
That money is for whatever the board,
Okay.
my understanding, I haven't come across anything that says differently. But you guys that were involved with that might know better than I do.
I would have to review that.
Well, I think since you have the opportunity to see where, I mean, you're working on the book, you know what, I think we need to give you that kind of permission, if that's what you're asking, to do that. If that's part of, if that is one of the ways you could make that up so that there is no loss, so that people, because there was, as I understood, it was going to be significant loss of part-time hours.
And it is actually, we're feeling it as far as scheduling already. It's, yeah. And then with anybody who is, out for whatever reason, sickness or whatever, that, yeah. So, yeah.
So at least my recommendation would be that you be allowed as the director to make that decision.
Well, the board needs to approve what the amount. I feel like that would be a board decision.
I truly, I just don't recall if there were limits on what that funds can be used for. Do you recall?
I can, somewhat speak on behalf of the Elliots who
Right.
donated a large sum of money for the children's area in the community room. And this endowment was set up to help support those rooms. So if the equipment broke down, they put in a very high-end
Right.
sound system and stereo system, video system in the community room. And I can't tell you the exact amount, but that they put towards the children's room. And this is to keep those things in those areas up to date and repaired. It's not a fund that we should be, in my opinion, it's not a fund that we should be pulling out for fixing a budget problem. It's to be used for those two rooms specifically. And they knew when they made their large donation for the remodel that things were out. They already have.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what it was set up for, Jim.
And I agree with that. I mean, if I gave that money for that purpose, then I would expect it to be spent for that,
Right,
and not for shortfalls.
right.
I think we absolutely need to follow what their intention was.
Absolutely.
And so,
But that wasn't what I was talking about, because I understood there was significant dollars that had been raised from the Dunn Trust.
Well, this is separate from the Dunn
I
Trust.
understand,
Yeah.
so I wasn't
Yeah.
talking about Elliott's.
Okay.
I would absolutely expect that to be done. And I also understand, having been in broadcasting for so long, that microphones and sound systems and things like that require engineering engineering and then require replacement. And the engineer that I had, I trusted him totally. When I needed new equipment, he brought it. And so I understand how that works, and it's especially depending on who's using it. I don't know how many folks, but I can tell you the more people that you increase the problem based on how many people are using that system.
Right.
Every time somebody goes like this on a microphone, I just think of the
Yeah.
dollars that we're wasting breaking those
Yeah,
microphones.
breaking the diaphragms on the mic.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a great program.
So I would say then, and as you were talking about that, yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, that's, because we had this conversation last year too about it, what its purpose was. Yeah, and since there are right now, aside from, well, actually, probably the next thing to go in that room is going to be the AW computers. And we've got 2 of those, and those are running about $3,800, I think, right now each. So far, they're working great. I've never had to do anything with them, which is fantastic.
And they were purchased new when we.
They were purchased new, yeah. That was part of the remodel, were those 2 computers. The other computers are just generic for web searching, whatever the kids use them for. So I think that, well, that 2,000 that's sitting there obviously wouldn't pay for one if it broke. But I also understand I think from talking to Chris Huber that if we did have a need for some of this money, that we would be able to access up to that amount.
Without penalty?
Yeah, I would have to get confirmation, but I had a conversation with him last year saying, well, this has to be in by February 18th. Well, our board doesn't meet until whatever. And he said, that's not a big deal.
I think they prefer that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But,
There's special exceptions.
right. So I can talk to him about that, if need be. But I guess at this point, putting it back into the endowment would be, I think, the best way to go right now, since we
Full
have no
amount.
immediate needs for it.
The full amount, Chris?
Oops. I think so. I mean, I guess, I could see taking a little bit and building up that, kind of like we do with the Dunn Trust, building up a little bit of that then can be accessed at some point for something related to the, if we had to call Sound Pro at one point last year because the AV system wasn't working and it was beyond my ability to. And they ended up having to send one of the control modules back and get it rebuilt, and I forget how much it was, but it was a fair amount. But we were able to cover it out of another budget. But so I could see if we wanted to set up a long-term fund, like we do right now, that has the 2,000 in it. Or no, actually only 1,000. I take that back. It's $1,000, not 2,000. So we may have spent some of that already.
From the Dunn.
No, actually, the Elliott Maintenance Fund was just $1,000. I said 2,000. I apologize. We haven't spent any of that money. So if we wanted to add, say, $1,000 a year to it, or something like that, then that might not be a bad way to be able to access those funds if we needed to for anything in the children's area in the community room. So that would be another possibility. Yeah. So, yeah. I guess that would be up to you guys to decide if you wanted to set aside some money every year to build that up.
And that's something we need to action now because that dividend is rolling back in. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, well, it said February 18th, but when I had talked to him, the CEO said that's not a big deal. You can,
Okay.
so we would, we would make that decision now, and then that money would get distributed however.
Discussion on options that we have. Is there a certain amount that you would like to, any amount that you would like to add to that $1,000?
It's tricky because it depends on the problem we run into. You know, it could be anywhere from, you know, a $200 fix for a service call to, you know, $5,000 or $6,000 to replace a whole system. So I don't think the system is in trouble right now, but you know, it's just,
Would that be something
it's hard to say.
we could budget for and maybe pull those funds the next year?
Well, that could be. I mean, if we decided that, yeah, that those all computers are, you know, 4 years old, they probably have a 5-year lifespan. We're going to have to come up with, you know, $5,000 or $6,000. Well, probably $6,000 or $7,000 to replace them. Then that's more money than this generates in a year. So if you were thinking long term like that, it'd be like, well, if we set aside, I guess if you figure it's a 5-year lifespan, then that would be, you know what, $500 a year over 5 years would be what, $2,500. So $500 a year wouldn't be enough to replace it.
And you anticipate another year maybe out of those? I know you don't have a crystal ball.
It's
but
what I can say about them is that I never have to do anything to them. All the other computers in the library, I am tweaking all the time. Those, to be honest, I don't even know how to get in. I would have to look up how to get into it to mess with it at all. So they're great that way. Now, part of that is because they're not hooked up to the internet, so they've never been updated. So the system is the way the system was when we got it, which works great for what it does, because since it's not connected to the web, there's no concerns about anything really, because it is just a separate thing sitting there plugged into the wall for electricity, which is great. And I would argue that's probably why I don't have to go in and do anything to it, is because it's never been updated.
Are they used a lot?
All the time. Oh, they're always used. Yeah, they're used a whole lot. Yeah.
So would it make sense to pull out an amount, even maybe this full amount, and have another fund accessible to you specifically for those computers?
I
Have fund after fund after fund, because it looks like we're, you know,
Well, and I mean, you know, the reason that we set up the Elliott Maintenance Fund, I called it in the first place, was so that money could be available for emergency repairs, not necessarily long term, but just this broke, we need to fix it, and being able to access the funds. So having a Dunn Trust savings account for certain things, having an Elliott for certain things, I think is just a good way to keep track of the money. Because we do the same thing with like the Bob Davis Memorial. That's, you know, we've got that. We've got Julie's Art Fund. We've got, you know, all that money is earmarked and accounted for. And I think it makes my job easier, because then I can go, oh, I've got, you know, $3,900 in this fund for this, you know, instead of like, well, we've got, you know, $47,000. I don't know if any of it's earmarked for anything. So I think setting aside some every year probably would be a good idea, because long-term budgeting as well as short-term concerns, you know, emergency concerns. So if we wanted to do a one-time distribution, you know, and take the maximum, that would give us $7,400 in there. And then when it came time to be at the end of this year, then we could look at the cost of those computers and say, well, okay, we're going to need this much money when these go out. And if they last another 8 years, that's awesome. You know, so I guess I would rather have the money available for replacements. But I think the idea of growing the endowment is also good because in the long run, that's going to be giving you more money each year. So I think splitting that money up is probably the best way to do it. Put some back in and keep some out. That would be my recommendation. How much did you say?
3,200, half of it.
Sure, if we kept half of it and put it in, I think that'd be a good start.
Well, do they go out simultaneously? They're not connected, so.
No, they're not connected. So it could be one. Yeah, I mean, we could decide, well,
We'll replace
there's one that gets, I would say the one is probably the first one kids go to. And I don't know why, it just is. It's on the right. Maybe that's psychological. I don't know. But it seems that there's one that's used more than the other a little bit. So, we could decide, well, okay, we've gotten 5 years out of these. Well, next year we'll replace the one. And then if we get another couple years out of the other one, great. And then they would be offset. So then, every 3 years, maybe you would upgrade one.
Well, they can also go for the 5% funding. You can also withdraw 5%, right?
Right, you can do 5%
So
a year, up to 5% a year, yeah.
I guess what I'm thinking is if you put $3,200 into to split it up, and then if you have an issue with both of them, or you've got money set aside for one of them, although it probably wouldn't be enough.
Well, right, but I mean, yeah. Whether we could pull money from someplace else, we do have a computer budget that we could pull a little bit from. So yeah, I mean,
We can't see into the
I would be
future,
okay
so
with
when-
pulling half of it out and putting it into an account and putting the other half back in. This amount depends on the stock market.
Right.
So, yeah.
All right.
And I think that, that's specifically what this fund is for the children's room.
Sure.
So I think it makes good sense for the children's room and the community rooms.
But if you don't use it at all, if you have access to some of it, but not all of it, you just carry that over into another year.
Yeah, like the 1,000 we pulled out last year, it's just sitting there for when we need it. If
So
it gets
whatever
rolled
num-
back into the endowment,
Whatever number
can't.
we come up with could conceivably not be used at all or used
Right.
minimally.
Right, and so the idea is that fund would grow every year, just like the,
If you want this, they want you to pull that out, Jim, that 5%. It doesn't touch the endowment. This is just the earnings on that.
I understand.
Okay.
And that's why I'm saying if he doesn't spend it, if we pull out 5% and you don't need it, because you don't have any.
it just sits there in the bank.
Yeah,
Yeah,
In our bank, not the.
Right.
bank.
yeah,
I got it.
yeah.
All right.
But that would make sense to me.
Yeah, being able to access the money is I think the key to it. Yeah.
Any more discussion or questions for Chris? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion if someone wants to propose an amount we are going to set aside, pull out.
I guess I'll propose the $3,200 be, or the $6,400 be split in half going into the endowment and half going into the savings.
All right, so it's been moved that $3,200 is removed from that to put into that separate fund. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any
Seconded
further-
by Kathy, okay.
Any further discussion?
Is there a need,
Clarification?
I'm sorry, is there a need to stipulate that funding and any revenue generated from it, interest revenue, be used for the children's area specifically?
/ community room? For the children's area / community room.
Of the Elliott Trust youth funding, so definitely add that. All right, any other questions, discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the $3,200 addition into the Elliott Trust savings, am I saying that right, Chris?
It would be the Elliott Maintenance Fund at this point is
Fund.
is the name for it, yeah.
signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Okay. All right. Then the other new business would be the House Bill 1239. And I just wanted to discuss it, make sure you guys are aware of it and what's going on. There isn't any actually action that we would take on it, but what House Bill 1239 does, if you're not familiar with it, is it removes protections of school, college, university, museum, or public library employees as far as being able to be prosecuted for disseminating material harmful to minors. Right now, all those groups are protected, along with, if you work at a liquor store and somebody shows you a fake ID and you sell them alcohol, you can't be prosecuted for that because they showed you that. If the minor is accompanied by a parent or guardian, or an adult with a written statement that the adult was the minor's parent or guardian, you're off the hook. What they want to do is change that so that teachers, museum workers, librarians can be prosecuted for disseminating information or for disseminating material harmful to a minor. What that would do would be, for example, if Kathy, who has nothing to do with the collection policy, checked out a book that was determined to be obscene, she would be responsible for checking that out, and she would face jail time / fine because of that.
She'd have to know it was obscene when she
No,
checked it out,
no, she wouldn't.
so then you're defining obscene.
Well, it follows the Miller test, which is in the South Dakota laws, of what that entails. The disseminating material harmful to minors is basically that same three-pronged Miller test, which predominantly appeals to the prurient, shameful, or morbid interest of minors, is patently offensive to prevailing standards in the adult community as a whole with respect to what is suitable material for minors, and taken as a whole is without serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for minors. Now, I would say that, well, I can definitely say that in our library, we don't have anything that would fit all of those criteria. We just don't. The problem is, if those protections are removed from us, then I believe that the next step is going to be to change that harmful to minors definition to whatever the powers that be decide it is. So some of the talk during the discussion that the legislature had on this was, well, one possibility may be to just, chain off the adult section of the library and minors would not be allowed in. It's with them, which means kid wants to read a book by Mark Twain. Yeah, sorry, you can't. That's an adult book. It's potentially harmful to you, so we can't check it out. Or I think my impression of this is that the main intent is to intimidate library boards and school boards and librarians to change their collection policies.
I don't see, I should have looked that up. Who presented this? Whose bill is it?
Oh, Soy, yeah, Soy was the main sponsor of the bill, who is listed in the legislature as a mother/lawyer from Sioux Falls. And in the testimony, it was interesting because I didn't get to see the whole thing, but I looked at part of it. And there was a lot of talk about us librarians are using national lists to pick items for our library. It's all coming from national lists. The implication is that national lists are bad. Now, my question to her is the book that you're using that you wanted to use as an example for the pornography, in their terms, that's in the libraries right now, what list did that come from? Was that a national list that you pulled that off of? The book that they were using was published in 2009. So it's not even a new book. It's an old book. It's poetry. It's about 5 kids who their lives are horrible and they end up involved in prostitution. So appealing to the prurient interest, I've started to read it because I'm like, okay, I need to be able to know what I'm talking about here. And yeah, it's not presenting gratuitous sex in a way that is appealing at all, really. It's showing the dark side of it. And I have a feeling from what I'm reading, it's going to get darker. And some people will probably find the language offensive. Is it obscene? I would argue no. And again, it goes back to if you don't want your kid reading it, don't let your kid check it out. So the other thing I thought was interesting about this is while they're getting rid of the protections for teachers and librarians and museum workers, if you're showing a movie in a theater, if you're the guy that turns the projector on and a kid goes and sees something that's determined to be obscene, they can't be held responsible. So how is that any different than a librarian that's not in charge of the collection? And the other part is, well, dissemination, what exactly is dissemination? If a kid walks in, opens up a book, and sees something, is that then our responsibility as librarians? He didn't check the book out, or she. They just opened it up and looked at it. Now, are we going to jail because they opened up a book in the library? That's, I believe, where this is potentially headed.
Then that would keep you from even having the book available, even for adults.
Well, or, and this will sound flippant, but or we need to put bail money into the budget for the library. Because we can't, it's like people who say, well, you guys need to have rating systems on your books. They do it for movies, let's do it for books. Well, who's going to rate every book? Who's going to go into our library and read every book and come up with what the rating should be? And who gets to decide? With it's there are a lot of pitfalls, and it basically comes down to, do you trust your librarians and your library board to have policies in place that keep the material, to keep from having obscene material in your library? If you don't trust us, well, then there's a big issue there. And if you don't want your kids accessing that material, don't let them in the library. They're all for parental choice, but they don't, So anyway, and then the other side of that that's brought up, which isn't necessarily an argument against this law, but if you look at what kids are exposed to on a daily basis, what they read in the library is potentially nothing.
Netflix, you have no protection there.
Right. Or pornography on their cell phones. This is it's not an issue. And I think I mentioned this already, apparently the legislature believes that libraries are not taking last year's law seriously that said minors can't access obscene materials on the internet or in the library. We already have policies in place. So some people believe that, like I said, that the libraries aren't taking that seriously, which I think is not correct. But it's just, I think this is a step toward implementing some kind of they don't like to use the word book bans, but it would essentially be banning certain books from, especially school libraries, if not public libraries. So overall, I think it's just a bad idea. I think it was passed under kind of false pretenses in the legislature. And we were told through the South Dakota Library Association to not get too scared off yet. Apparently, there's a fair amount of resistance toward this in the Senate, which is where it's headed now. But the SDLA president has already had emails from librarians saying, I'm going to move out of the state. I don't want to even be here. If somebody was interested in being a librarian, they're not going to want to be a librarian in South Dakota. Same thing's happening in Idaho. And then I think another piece of this is the lawsuits that will be filed because of the legislation. And so that's just, there's more money that the state doesn't have that would be spent on trying to defend a bill that
I would think John Carley, our senator from Meade County, would be, I'd have to ask him, but this sounds like something he would be supportive of. I mean,
oh, he would be very much supportive of this, I would assume, of passing the bill. He would be in favor of this bill. Yes.
he'll be here Saturday.
Well, and Jorgensen voted and Rice both voted for it. Jorgensen sent me a nice email saying that she just feels like there shouldn't be pornography in the library, and that's why she voted for it. To which it's already out of her hands, so I'm not going to bog her down with it, but I am planning on responding to her email saying, well, yeah, here's, it's not, and here's the reasons why.
When is it going to be heard at the Senate floor?
Hasn't been scheduled yet. It's going to the Senate Judiciary Committee
Okay.
first.
Cracker Barrel is Saturday morning, Jim,
9 o'clock.
up at the,
Up at the, yeah.
Is that where the Meade County?
Yeah, it's in the Erskine building, yeah, in the commissioners, where it always is, yeah,
Had to wander around to find it, but
yeah,
plenty.
yeah,
They say there's plenty of room, but they ran out of seats pretty easy.
yeah,
I had to move about.
which is great. I know, you kept,
Well, I had to see.
bopping
it,
around.
You couldn't see.
Well, right.
I'd like to see what when they're speaking, I'd like to see what it is they're saying, and you couldn't, that room isn't made to where you can see exactly, so I
well, not with that big thing they had up there, that's true, so,
found a spot I could look at.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that
So that's
update.
that, yes.
Appreciate that, and if you hear anything, please let us know if you
I will, yeah, I'll keep you guys up to date as I hear stuff.
any information. I don't see any reason to go in executive session. I don't see anyone else sitting out there wanting to come before the board, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Moved
I'll second.
and seconded.